Thank you very much. Thank you. It is indeed an honor to be invited to share this time with you today. And there are a number of coincidences about my visit here. In fact, I had a niece to have attended this campus when it was under another name. And so it was somewhat a pleasure to get a chance to see the campus, which is a lovely campus. And I can understand why you certainly do not want to let it go or to lose it. And I congratulate you and the efforts of Brother Cottrell, who I had the pleasure of seeing on Tony Brown's show when he explained his efforts here. So it was good, again, to see in concrete and mortar and in human terms what he explained, what he was doing here. So you have my very fullest support. I am overwhelmed by the effort that I see here and by the variety of products and just the whole scope of things that you exhibit here today. I will return to New York with a great warmth of heart in terms of the experiences I've had so far at this time. I thank you very much for the introduction as well, and Brother Howard and those others of you who saw fit to invite me here. There was a mention of 2 or 3 of my publications. Some of you, I'm sure, are familiar with them. I won't go on at length at them, except just to give you a little idea of what they're about. The developmental psychology of the black child, which is nearing rewrite time. It's been around for quite some time, so I'm looking forward to rewriting it next summer. This book, of course, tries to get over the fact that the black child is not a white child who happens to be colored or painted. And too often I hear this phrase, we're all the same except for the color of our skins. The color of our skin represents a long, deep, ancient history. The reason we are the color we are is the result of the historical and cultural experiences of our people. We carry in our genes the total history of African people. Our children contain in their genes not just the programs that determine how tall they will be or how heavy they will be or these other physiological characteristics, but they contain the total history of African people, political, social, biological, and otherwise. And we must keep this in mind. And that history is not a duplicate of any other people's history. And therefore, to understand our children and to understand ourselves, we must understand our history and our bodies. And our bodies are not the duplicates of European bodies. Therefore, we cannot study the European body, nor the nutritioning of that body as a source for the proper nutrition of our own bodies to fit the needs of our own bodies. We must know ourselves. Our children, just as our ancestors were the first to walk on the face of this earth, to talk first, to organize politically and socially, to organize social relations and so forth, you will see that our children walk earlier, talk earlier, their bones grow faster, their teeth grow faster. As a matter of fact, they are born intellectually in advance of the white child. The black child comes on this earth doing things on the very first and second day of life it takes the average white child 4 to 6 months to do. So we are not talking about a duplicate. To base then the teaching and training of our children on that of white children is to miseducate our children and to rear them incorrectly. And that's one of the major problems we are having today in the education of our children. We are basing that education upon the history and experience of another people. And we must bring this to a close if we are to save our people. We must understand. You must understand that just as your own personal history, just as your own psychology can only be explained in terms of your personal and unique history. That you cannot take another person's psychology based on their history and experience and explain you. You cannot take the psychology of another people based on their history and experience and explain yourself or explain black people. And today, the pedagogy, the school programs and so forth that exist, that are used to educate our children, are programs based on the history and experience and therefore the psychology of Europeans. And despite the best intentions of people in those school systems, our children will be miseducated, if not poorly educated at all. We have to keep this in mind. We must also recognize this, that the destiny of children is not the same. Get rid of the term equal education. Get rid of the term standard education. There's no such thing as standard education and equal education. Your children must be educated appropriate to the problems they must solve. And those problems are not the same as white children. The destiny of black people is not the destiny of whites. And therefore the children must be reared and educated to fulfill those destinies. Recognize that the basic destiny of the white child is essentially conservative. That is, to maintain the advantages that the Europeans already have and to enhance those advantages. The destiny of the black child then, when we look at where our people are the world over, when we complain that even in our own countries we do not have control of the economic systems, when we see our people starving to death over the world's wealth under their soils, when we look everywhere and we see the black man on the bottom of every ladder, we must recognize then that the destiny of black children is revolutionary. They must be educated to overthrow the world as it now exists. We cannot talk about feeding our people. We cannot talk about liberating our people. We cannot talk about our people being equal in power and equal in influence to any other people unless we are talking about revolution, ladies and gentlemen. And therefore, the education of white children cannot be adequate to that task. And we must recognize this and transform the education and rearing of our children to fit the task. I don't have time to talk much about this today, but I just want you to know that, in a way, the developmental psychology of the black child begins to set that up. And therefore, an educational system, a rearing system, must be based on a knowledge of the development of one's own children. You cannot appropriately rear and educate black children on the standard books that are out here. You will be misled and you will miseducate them and bring them up incorrectly. And this is part of the reason we have the problems that we have today. You must know the psychology of your own children. It's very important. And you must base your educational system on that psychology. That is one of the reasons why now I'm sort of putting together an adjunct to this. The working title is On the Education of Black Children. Of course, it may be a different title once we get it published. But I'm going through here then an analysis of the cognitive styles of black children and of black people, and how our very ways of thinking and behaving and perceiving the world have been created to maintain our oppressors. I often tell people that if you want to know the kinds of problems that our children will have in the schools, you need only ask the question, what traits must be missing in them in order for the system to stay as it is, in order for the Europeans to stay on top? What must they not have in abundance? Or you can ask it the other way. What things, if we had them, would frighten those who dominate us? And when you answer that question, you will see your children and our children having problems in those very areas. And so I was on a program here a few weeks ago, and someone was asking me, why are so many of our children having problems in math and failing math? And I had to say, you must understand that they must fail. You have to start from that. If you recognize how whites are so frightened of Japanese technology, how much more frightened would they be of African technology? It would be over. And since technological thinking develops out of mathematical thinking and scientific thinking, technological organization and so forth, you're going to find our children having problems in the area of mathematics and science. In the other areas, you find that. It goes even on the psychological plane as well. What would happen if we truly loved each other deeply? If we could truly and unsubconsciously identify ourselves as Africans all over this world. And if we truly then could act in a collective unity based on that collective identity, it would be over, ladies and gentlemen. The European is only 10% of the world's population. You must recognize that in order for this 10% of the world's population to rule the other 90%, the other 90% must be out of their minds. Yes. A true black psychology under oppression must begin with the acknowledgement that in order for us to be in the position we are in, we literally have to be crazy. And I'm not being rhetorical. We couldn't be in our right minds. We couldn't be at the center of ourselves. We couldn't be in full knowledge of reality and fully connected to each other and be in the position we're in. We could only be in the position we're in because we are conflicted and divided and have problems with identity and have problems with love and have problems with being reliable in relationship to one another, have problems being trustworthy in our relationships and so forth. And consequently, because if we could be trustworthy in the fullest sense and loving and reliable and fully identified with each other and so forth, this would overthrow the powers that be. You will see then our children and our people having the greatest problems in these areas. So then it becomes incumbent on a black psychology to see how the European then promotes the creation of the kind of consciousness that exists in us today. Once you recognize how that is done, and once you recognize what abilities and orientations have to be removed from our people or impaired in our people in order for the status quo to exist, then you're ready to write an educational program. Then you're ready to write a program in terms of how to rear your children. And then you'll recognize that equal education and all the other nonsense you hear out here is of no account whatsoever. We need a total reorganization of systems and values. We, in the black on black violence, I think you'll find an approach that's somewhat unusual. Here we are talking about the psychodynamics of black annihilation, self-annihilation, in service of white domination. Here I try to explain that the behavior of black-on-black criminals, particularly the violent ones, and black-on-black violence in general, even that of suicide, has been created and manipulated by this system. And I try to indicate that this criminality and this violence is manipulated in a way as to maintain white domination. I talk about what I call the American dilemma. How do you as a nation project the image of liberalism and at the same time maintain oppression? You see, And that's a dilemma, and this is what this country faces. How can you say we're getting better and our system is becoming non-racial and non-discriminating and the whole bit, and at the same time keep people in a lower position? Of course, the answer to that is that the people must appear to destroy themselves. And you will see then the community is filled with what we call self-destructive behavior. It's a game. It's a game, and we have to understand what that game is. Don't be deceived by the election of politicians. Don't be deceived by the appointment of black men and women to high position in this society. Don't mistake me. I don't mean you don't have to go for it, but don't be deceived by it. Ladies and gentlemen, during the Carter administration, the whole thing that's going on in America was laid right out, ABC fashion. ABC. And the scenario is being followed right through. How, they say, are we going to maintain Africa under our control? And how are we going to cut off the African continent from the African Americans in such a way as to maintain dominance over both populations? And they laid it out. We're going to get more black elected officials. We're going to get more blacks appointed to office. We're going to get more blacks appointed to high position in industry and so forth, because these blacks will defend the system. They will act and think that they have a stake in the system. And I often tell young college students that you're being educated to put a black face on white power. You have to understand that. Because when you look at it in depth, ladies and gentlemen, they are what I call European constants. Certain basic relationships we have with Europeans have not changed for the last 400 or 500 years. And there is no intention for them to change. The only thing that will change will be the surface, and there will be cosmetic changes. As a matter of fact, all of the changes we see today and we think of as progress are changes to maintain the system. And you must be able to look through the glitter. You see, that's one of the reasons why black children must have problems in abstract thinking. Why black children must have problems in conceptual thinking and critical thinking skills, so that they can be deceived by the apparent, by the superficial, and not see behind the surface. And I'll talk to you later in a minute or two about why our children must be impulsive and lack self-control. This system economically depends upon the lack of control in our people. It depends upon impulsive behavior in our children. Must recognize that. It needs that kind of behavior and creates it. It creates the inability to delay gratification. There's a lot of money made on blacks' inability to delay gratification. There's a lot of power made when a person can't think between here and next week, because then he can't plot the overthrow of his enemy next year or 10 years down the road. It is all connected, ladies and gentlemen, but we can't keep going with it today. We'll work on that at another time. Perhaps when the book comes out, we'll get through with it. You have to understand, nothing is created in this system by accident. Nothing at all. And the problems you see are created problems, and they function. I'll look a bit now at the psychology of cooperative economics in the African American community. And before I get there, I'll just look at the issue, why economic development, which I'm going to talk a bit about today. Because often when we think about economic development, we think about jobs. And we have a job mentality as a people. One of the reasons, too, our children fail in school is we give them no transcendent reasons for being in school beyond go to school and get a job. I'm telling you, that is a very damaging bit of advice, because it limits the perspectives of your children. Our children exist more than for getting a job. That is still a servant's mentality. And I'm telling you, we still have the same basic relationship to Europeans that our great slave grandfathers and grandmothers had to the European masters. And that is what? Working for their profit. And that has not changed one bit. Simply because we may be in computer technology or some of these other sophisticated things, the relationship is the same. Still making money for whom? Somebody else. Don't forget that slaves were highly skilled, by the way. There was more than just a division between house slaves and field slaves. There were all kinds of skills that slaves had. Iron workers and ship builders and millwrights. And in fact, at the end of slavery, there were more black skilled workers than there were white workers. So, ladies and gentlemen, we never lacked skills, even under slavery. And we never lacked a variety of skills. So the idea now that we have a variety of jobs that we haven't done before does not change the fundamental relationship at all. We are still in the same position of creating more wealth for others than we create for ourselves. And it is the intention of the European that this continues forever. No matter how much we get promoted, that's the point of the game. And I'll come back to this thing later, where you limit your children's horizons to getting a job. That's going to limit intellectual capacity. It puts chains on your minds and on your behavior. It destroys our children. People are educated for far greater reasons than the mere getting of jobs. You must recognize that education is fundamental to the survival of a people. You educate children, in essence, to further your group interest and to maintain group survival. The jobs that they do are part of that overall focus, not individual workers here and there. The jobs that people do in a nation are a part of that nation's total defense against its enemies. And if the jobs your children do and the jobs we do are not combined to defend us as a people and to secure our survival into the oncoming centuries, then we are going to be destroyed by the very jobs we hold. And you'll see it. Colin Powell. He's got a job. And look at what a job he has. And the first job he did was on Panamanian blacks. And now he's getting ready to sacrifice black boys and girls fighting in a foreign land at this very moment. When are we going to wake up, ladies and gentlemen? We've had black men fighting every war this country's had with the crazy hope that after we got through, we were going to get something that we didn't have before. It's time to study the history of the black soldier and see how time after time the black soldier was gypped. How after many of the wars, they were not only disarmed, but actually lynched. And many, even in this very state, were lynched as a part of the United States Army. You must understand this. Keep this in mind. I was a boy growing up in Mississippi, and I saw black men going to Korea, coming back in the bags and coming back in the coffins. And we were still at the back of the buses, going to the black and white fountains, going through the back of restaurants and all the other stuff I'm sure many of you are still familiar with. Fighting for another people who, as soon as their feet hit this doggone land, could exercise the rights we did not have. And who are still over there today so that if the North Koreans or the Chinese decide they want to take South Korea again, it'll be black men and women standing there protecting Koreans. And now we have a bunch of Negroes in New York City who think they owe the Koreans a living. It's an amazing situation. It's amazing. You got folk up there thinking, you know, and now they got a little boycott going up there and a whole lot of confusion, people feeling guilty, and they have a boycott because a Korean knocked a woman down and so forth. You don't need that kind of excuse. We don't need that kind of excuse for putting these people out of the community and for freezing them out. Ladies and gentlemen, you must survive. You cannot survive giving your money to other people. Black people today only spend a nickel out of every dollar with themselves. You cannot survive at that rate, ladies and gentlemen. You don't owe Korea, you don't owe Koreans, you don't owe anybody a living but yourself. As Dr. Clark said, excuse my English, and he said it, black people don't owe anybody anything but ass whipping. That's all I'm telling you. That's what it's about. I'm telling you. And here you go, fighting for a people, dying for a people, and not only do you do that, you pay taxes. You know, people forget black people are taxpayers, by the way. Oh, you know, we give you this and we give you that, you know, and the government, who is the government? It's our money. You know, it's our money. We get a little uptight when we talk about the money, as if, you know, white folk are giving us something. It's our money. We paid for it. And when you count up all of the stuff they owe us from slavery and underpayment and all of that kind of stuff, the whole country should be ours. I'm telling you. And so what happens? Not only do we go and fight and die and defend the rights of people, the rights which we ourselves do not enjoy, we then give them our own tax money in the form of grants and loans and aid and all this other stuff, and build Korea up into one of the fastest growing industrial nations of the world. We did it again in Europe with the Marshall Plan. Not only did we die over there, then our tax money went over there to rebuild Europe and the whole bit. And then you sit here and believe this nonsense where people tell you they're ahead of you because they work harder. Nonsense. They got your money. And then they come back with your money in their pockets and go in business in your community and treat you like a dog. Come on. This is the way this game is set up. The Japanese, low-rating black people all over the place. Insulting black people. Here again, black men fighting and dying, black tax money going over, building Japan, billions and billions of dollars. That same money comes over. They sell us these boom boxes and all the other this crap that we buy from them. And I guess in a way they're trying to wake us up on a certain level. I mean, what can you say about people who do things like that? This is, of course, in part the result of equal education. Standard education. I was here talking the other day to a group of students, talking about the fact that we are dealing here with the people, whites, and I'm not separating the good ones from the bad ones, okay? And that paralyzes black people, you know. Let's see, there's the good ones and this is the... I saw black people of all classes in the back of that bus. And I saw black people of all educational levels take the seat behind hillbillies and all other kind of rednecks and crackers. And there was no distinguishing with this way or the other way. Not at all. We don't have time to be counting good ones and bad ones. And in this book, black on black violence, you're going to find even the good are not good. That's right. That goodness is still based on the blood money of our people and the blood money of Indians. You're only good because you don't have to go out and knock somebody in the head because you've done it already. You destroyed a whole nation of people and nations of people. And now you got the money in your pocket and you brag because you don't have to mug anymore. But you're not good. When you accepted the blood money and live off the blood money, you have accepted the sin that goes with it. You don't believe your own book. When the rich man came to Jesus and said, "What must I do to be saved?" Give the money back. Yeah. Yes, sir. Give it back. Give it back. Well, you saw what happened to him, didn't you? Of course, I use this as a lesson, too, for us as black people. You believe, and that's good, you believe that Jesus is a God. No problem with that whatsoever. But you see a man standing in the face of God, and when God says, "Give the money back," the man literally says, "Screw you. I am not giving it back." How do you then, human beings, think that the white man is going to hand you his wealth? You got another thought coming. You are out of your minds. You think someday, some way, these people, out of the goodness of their evil hearts, are going to hand you and sacrifice you some money. You better read that Bible again. You understand? One day I'm going to come back here and just do a thing on the Bible. Oh yeah, we need to do something on the Bible. Oh yes, ladies and gentlemen, we need to do something about this Bible. I'm telling you, it teaches so many wonderful lessons if you got your eyes open. It is more than a religious book. It is a book, I use it for psychology all of the time. I use it for political science. That's one of the reasons why the Jews, who are less than 3% of the world population, of the United States population, have such an influence on it. And here we are 4 and 5 times more and have so little. And here are people less than 1% of the world's population and about to bring an end to the world by their behavior. Because they see those Old Testaments not only as a religious book, but as a book of psychology and political science and a whole lot, because there's all of that in there. All of it's in there, man, I'm telling you. It's all there, all there. And the story of Exodus just illustrates it from one point to the other. One point to the other. It often surprises people when you say, how many of you know that Moses ordered the killing of about 3,000 people? Why did he order the killing of about 3,000 people? Why did he later on order the killing of 24,000 people? Check it out, read it. You'll see the politics of things. Were these Israelites really converted to God when they walked out of Egypt, as the myth says? If so, if they were that converted, why did he have to go up to a mountain and come down with laws and rules and regulations and come down and find them partying and worshiping another God? Come on. And what did he say? Those on my side over here and those on not on my side, what? Over there. And those not on my side, goodbye. Why? We are in the middle of our enemies. We are in the foreign land. We have not yet come to a homeland. We cannot survive being disunified. We cannot have philosophies in conflict. And so somebody has got to go. And you see it being executed right there. But you see, if you let people psych you out, and then you read the Bible, you'll miss all the important points. I'm telling you. We'll do a number on Exodus one day. Reread it, though. Check it out. So I was telling the sister when I was over here, check out how rebellious those Israelites were. They were chosen not because they were better than other people. They were chosen because they were so hard-headed and rebellious. Check them out. They were rebelling at every minute. We were better off in Egypt. Well, you brought us out here to be killed. They nearly hung Moses about 3 or 4 times. He came within an inch of being lynched. And God came at him and wanted to smote him down I don't know how many times. And the only person stood between them was Moses. Wait a minute, don't take him yet. Check it out. Watch him negotiate with God. Watch when he gets to the border of the promised land. And he doesn't smote the people in the promised land with a disease so the Israelites could walk in there. Here's this all-seeing, all-knowing God that says, Moses, you got to go over there and spy on these people yourself and get what? Intelligence and bring it back. So that you can what? Get the land that I promised you by what? War. By war. By fighting. And I'm telling you that, and particularly those, just leave it all on the Lord kind of folk. You understand? God promised them the land. But at the same time, they had to do what? Fight for it. You have to understand that. Here he is all powerful and all knowing. He just didn't open it up to the, he just said, you're here, you're my favorite children, walk on in. Not at all. You're going to fight for it. As a matter of fact, you noticed the first battle, so they even lost, didn't they? Yeah. Yeah. Notice that. Check it out. Check it out. Even if it's promised to you, you still got to fight for it. There's no way out of it. Got to fight for it. And check out how they were psyched out when they went in. Even though it was promised to them, they were spooked out, weren't they? Yeah, I think he sent about 12 of them over there, and 10 of them were psyched out. Oh, they're giants. They're invisible. We can't be. Boy, and they were really belly aching in. That's when they almost got Moses there, within an inch of his life. And you could hear him hollering and wailing all night long in the camp. Ah! We were better off back in slavery. You brought us out here to be killed. The whole thing. And even God in there, and you read it. You don't have to believe me as your preacher tell you. You read it. You read it for yourself. He said, man, I ought to just, get rid of these people. And Moses said, wait a minute, cool out now. And it's interesting the way he negotiates, It's not just, he talks to him. It's not, how you going to look promising these people this land, and everybody else knows you promised to them. You led us through here with this pillar of fire and all that bit. And then you get them right here and do what? Kill them. What are people going to say about you? Okay. So he changes his mind. All right. But those of you who were frightened, and did what they were promised the land, and yet, despite the fact that they were promised, they were still frightened. They felt like the people that they were facing, except for 2 of them, they could not defeat. They were invincible. And you remember what God did to them. Let them stay out there 40 more years to wipe out those cowards. And only those of you who believed that these people could be overcome, and your children will be permitted into the promised land. The rest of you who didn't believe, you're going by the wayside. Now, we have a promised land, ladies and gentlemen, but we're going to have to fight for it. Understand? And we have an enemy and a group of people who to many of us appear invincible. Appear as if they are impossible to overthrow, who have destroyed our self-confidence, and who make us think that we could not build a world superior to the one that they have here today. And therefore, we feel like we need them in the world. Yeah, we have the same thing. We've been psyched out. Oh, they got the atomic bomb. Oh, they got this bomb. Oh, If they weren't in the world was going to the dark ages, this kind of thing. We have that kind of attitude, We have that kind of attitude. And look what is happening to our people. The cowardice that we are showing is showing itself up in crack addiction. Yes, in self-destructive criminality, in bad living and unhealthy living, all kinds of problems, because there are a whole bunch of people who believe that they cannot change this world, who have accepted this mean world the way it is, and now live in frustration and bitterness and disappointment and try to cover it over with all kinds of sinful pleasures and self-destructive habits. And only those of us will get to this promised land who know in our hearts that this European can be overthrown and done in. We have the so-called black-on-black violent criminal because he has learned from masters, the white-on-black criminal. And this system and these people are a criminal people. And the earth today is suffering death and damnation as a result of their greed and rapaciousness. I keep telling my people the situation is not equality. Too many of us think that equality and freedom is represented by the white man. As Paulo Freire says, the oppressed often feels that to be free and to be free is to be like the oppressor. It's no one more like the oppressor than the black-on-black criminal. I'm telling you, the black-on-black criminal is a white man in blackface because he exhibits the same attitude toward his people as the white criminal does, as the white racist does. He doesn't love them, he hates them, he rejects them, he feels apart from them. He sees them merely as tools of exploitation and so forth. And when you look at the psychology of the black-on-black violent criminal, you will see that psychology exactly parallels the white racist. Because he has internalized the white racist lies, and now he has become an instrument for their activity against his own people as such. And we see this kind of thing going on. And in acting the way he does, he thinks he's acting like a white man. So if a white man is free to kick the butt, he figures his freedom is the same thing. And he represents, if he sees the white man's freedom as his capacity to treat black people any way he feels like it and to rise above the law, then he, in imitating the white man, is going to do the same thing the white man does. That's why we got to get over the equality game. If a person lives upon our oppression, if their lifestyle is based on our oppression, and it is, and exploitation, then to be just like them is to join in with them in oppressing our own people, and it becomes self-oppression as well. And therefore, what it means to be free and what it means to be equal cannot mean what it means to be like white folk. In fact, it has to go in another direction. And that's why we have to have an Afrocentric education. But let me get on with it here. The American dilemma then, which depends upon the oppression of our people, and yet it must project an image of the liberal image, plays a heavy game and leads us into self-destructive kinds of behavior. Now, what are you going to have, and how does it work out? Let's look at it practically. The more black judges you have appointed to the courts, the more black them from making money, you actually impair their mental functioning. You see, because when you work on a certain job and the job makes certain demands on your mind and helps organize your mind, there is the tendency, even when you're not conscious of it, to pass on that mental heritage to your children. You see? So when you're kept out of jobs of planning and thinking and organizing and controlling and exercising real power and looking into the future and organizing the present in terms of the future and connecting past, present, and future and so forth, then you will not be able to pass those capacities on to your children, and you see your children having problems then in long concentrated thinking, in sequential thinking, and the other kind of thinking required to run a society. So the discrimination is not only there to just be mean, it is there to actually shape the consciousness of black people. And if we're to gain control of ourselves and of our destiny and control of our wealth, we have to go beyond jobs. We have to go for control. We have to ask ourselves, what will it take to gain control of this world? Gives you butterflies, huh? Oh, yes, one of the major problems black people have is we have no enemies. Yeah, man, this love game is going to get you in serious trouble. You're going to see in this book, I'm going to contrast the academic abilities of black children as they've been defined by psychologists and all those people, and I'm going to put them right next door to the characteristics of a neurotic lifestyle called hysteric and impulsive. And you're going to see they are the same thing, okay? You're going to see a game there that's put up. And you're going to see how this thing was really shaped. In other words, there's a relationship between economics and intelligence. When your goals are to work for people and not to overcome, then the mind tends to, like water, find its own level, you see, and it's not going to go beyond. But when your goal is to outsmart another people, to defeat another people, to get out from under their domination, it calls for another thing on your mind, you see. Your mind is organized in a totally different kind of way. That's why you can't have the same education sitting in the same classroom, taught the same lesson by the same teacher, because you don't have the same intentions. It is intentions that determine what is done with knowledge. It is intentions that determines what knowledge is valuable and not valuable. It is intentions that look at the implications of knowledge. A person who intends to be a master in the world, intends to control the world, uses knowledge in a very different way from a person who only intends to qualify for a job and get over. I'm telling you. And therefore, the Japanese look at this European as an economic enemy. The Europeans look at themselves as economic enemies. But seeing themselves that way motivates their mentality and their mental development, their imagination, organization, and a whole lot of social and intellectual activities flow from the overarching goal of a people. That's why I say you got to have transcendence. These children, I often ask, you want your children to read, and I ask you the question, to read for what? For what purpose? To what end? You see, and it's got to go beyond the job. You see, economics and self-defense. We are in a terrible shape, ladies and gentlemen. Here we are, part of this great 90% of the world's population. And when the fate of the world is determined, we have two white men sitting down at a table. Gorbachev and Bush. How is it that two white folk representing 10% of the world's population sit down and determine the fate of the rest of the world? This has got to change. And we are praying that they don't get in a fight. You know, they don't start something. And we're wondering what's going to happen to us. And then we get 7 industrialized nations, white folk, with one Asian counterpoint now perhaps, to come in and determine the whole economic, political organization of the world. All little countries compared to the rest of the world. And we sit around and wonder what they're going to do to us or not. This cannot go on, ladies and gentlemen. That means we are vulnerable. We are open. If these two white men decided to attack the African continent and to destroy or to re-enslave African people, there is not one African nation that can stand up and defeat them militarily. We got a group of people here who have satellites out there that are not just studying the weather. Well, you know, the weather satellite says today. You know, that's what people think is out there. You got to be out your mind. These people have weapons and weapon systems out there. These people have systems that from 500 and 600 miles out can hear this conversation right here in this room. That can read from 500 and 600 miles out the license plate on your car. You understand? And they got black men and women taking this stuff up there. Any nation today, then, African nation, that is not ready to engage in Star Wars and to fight in space is a nation that's at the mercy of another people. It doesn't matter if you're flying jets and so forth, because the laser beams and the other beams are going to be coming outside of out of range. And here we are sitting ducks, depending on the goodwill of another people whose history shows that they have no goodwill. Yeah. You don't have to believe me. Read about the Indians. Read about the Tasmanians. Read about the Arawaks. Read about the Australian Aborigines and all the other people who were wiped out and cleaned off the earth. At any point, these people felt that they were in their way, and these people still have that psychology today. I'm telling you. And that's what I was trying to tell the class the other day. You are dealing with the people who will not think 1 second about wiping you off the face of this earth if they see wiping you off is to their advantage. And why can I say that? Because you see it in the history books. It's right there. But one of the students told me, they don't write about this in the history books anymore. I says, what? Oh no, they don't write about, too much of the killing of the Indians and wiping them out. They were arrogant when you were in school, when I was in school. And they were so arrogant, they just wrote about it and put it right there and made movies about it, killing and shooting up the Indians and the whole bit. So I guess they recognized we got a little more sophisticated. So now, they're rewriting it about exploring the West, stuff like that. But again, you see how dangerous this is, though, and you can see the need of an Afrocentric education here, can't you? When you come then to youngsters and saying you are dealing with the people whose whole history shows they do not hesitate to destroy another people for which they have no use, now you're looking like a wild man. Hey, he must be crazy. He must be off. Why? Because they don't have the knowledge and the background to connect with what I'm saying. Because the history has been erased or rewritten in a way so their consciousness cannot take in what I'm saying. And therefore, I become the enemy. I'll tell you one thing, ladies and gentlemen, all of us, in order for us to be in the position we're in, we literally must be backwards. Our whole orientation must be turned backwards. We must believe lies and take lies for truth and take truth for lies. We must take love for hate and hatred for love. We wouldn't be in the position we're in. And therefore, when I come and try to warn the youngsters upon whose very survival our people depend, and they have been given a pack of historical lies, they will now see me as the enemy and their enemies as their saviors. And this is what is going on. This is why there's no such thing as equal education. You got to teach a whole different thing, whole different lesson here. You have to understand this. Economics, then, is what's needed to have military strength. There is a direct relationship between military strength and power and economic power. You do not have poor nations and poor people with great military power, ladies and gentlemen. You can't do it. And without great economic power, black people, African people will not be in the position to defend themselves militarily. The United States fleet over there in the seas in Asia costs $50 billion a year. Now that's just one fleet. Add up all the rest. Billions and billions of dollars must be generated by this economy so that this country can protect its economic interests. One of the problems it is having right now is that as it thinks economically, it is not going to be able to support that vast military machine needed to protect its interests. And now they're having problems. Well, can we get Japan to take over that part of the world? Except there's a problem there. We've had Japan over there before. and so there's a whole issue. And something has got to happen here economically if this country is to protect its interests and protect its people. And check it out and see what's going on there. We cannot defend ourselves then without an economic system. You can train your children to think mathematically, to think scientifically, to do the whole 9 yards in science. But black people would not have entered the scientific age. In fact, we are not in the space race, you know. We're not in the space race at all. Oh, you talk about those guys flying up there. You know, they're just going for the ride. You know, let's help them along. Come on up, man. You know, want to ride with a little bit, check out the earth. Look at it. It's blue, look peaceful, isn't this? You know, you're not in the space race. You know, the first living thing they sent into space was a monkey. You know, the monkeys are not in the space race yet. So the idea that you're going to fly up and come back down and say you're in the space race, you got another dog copy. The only thing you're doing is helping to build the power that will be used against you. Until African engineers, African scientists and so forth, with African money from African soil, send African ships into space and build African battle stations in space and explore planets and so forth, we are not in the space race. Knowledge must be backed up by money and economics, or else you'll end up working for your enemy, despite your Afrocentricity. You understand? It costs billions of dollars to do the standard physics experiment today in quantum mechanics. In fact, you're getting a big ring down here in Texas somewhere, right? Billions of dollars, miles around, and they're going to send particles around and around there, and they're getting into the secrets of the earth, which they're going to use one day against you. Billions of dollars. You're not going to then fight this kind of people by merely learning that information. You're going to have to be able to finance those kind of experiments yourself. That means you got to have control. Speaking of self-defense, when I talk about education for survival, you know, we tend to think, well, I'm sending my son and my daughter to school, to medical school, and they are going to be a healer. And that's fine. But you know, a person that knows about a disease is not only then in a position to heal it, but in a position to create disease. You understand? The agriculturalist who studies pest control and crop control of crop diseases and so forth is also the person who can unleash a disease into a crop. In other words, there are two sides to education, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, the educated person is the most dangerous person on earth. Oh, yes. The most dangerous person on earth is the educated person. We'll deal with that at some other date. But let me tell you one day, when this earth comes to an end, it will be brought to an end by PhDs, law-abiding people with fair-haired children, living on the corners, pillars of the community, who would have gone out and done the research for these bombs and these weapons and all of these other evil instruments that can destroy millions and millions of lives in one fell swoop that a bunch of muggers would take 1,000,000 years to do. It won't be the crack dealers and the muggers that destroy the earth, ladies and gentlemen. It will be law-abiding, educated, nice people who do it. But we forget that, you know. It's a power, you have to understand. And that's why you have to be very careful about the people you let get educated and the kind of education they get. You understand? That's another topic. But what do we mean here then? When you do, and there are a lot of us who believe that AIDS, for instance, is a created disease. And if it is, chances are it's created by MDs, PhDs, all the other Ds you can name, working on it in laboratories, supported by government money, your tax money, government money. In fact, when you look at the research in germ warfare, research in germ warfare is done by 23 major universities in this country, and also the New York State Department of Health. Who do you think builds these planes and bombs and all the other stuff? The guy on the street? No, it's the man in the lab. It's the professors who represent such objectivity. You have to understand here what you're dealing with. What does it mean then, ladies and gentlemen? It means that the American educational system is as much a part of its military strength as is its army. It is the educational system and the university system that creates the bombs and the weapons and all of the other things that are used by the army to intimidate the people of the world and to protect American interests. Ultimately, then, that is where you see the very function of education. Not the mere giving of jobs, but as a part of a total defense of a people, a part of their means of survival. So consequently, you must understand, you have to redefine your education and the education you're giving to your children in terms of, will it defend our interests and advance our interests and keep us alive in the next century? I don't care where that education is given, whether it is in Harvard or Yale or any other place. If it does not meet the criterion that it will keep us alive as a people into the next century, it is bad education. You understand? The education is not made good by where it's taught and by whom it's taught. You understand? Because it's taught at Harvard doesn't make it good at all. As a matter of fact, it often makes it worse. In order for this world to exist the way it is, the black man must be educated into ignorance. That's why you find in these schools, in a sense, how children get dumber and dumber the longer they stay in them. You see them bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, headed out in the first grade, the third grade, the fourth grade, and you start seeing the fire going out of their eyes as they move into the fifth and the sixth. And by the ninth grade, you got to drag them in there. And by the 11th, they're already out and going. This is set up, ladies and gentlemen. You have to understand that. How is germ warfare done? Germ warfare, you create a germ, and if you can, you develop an inoculation against that germ for your own population, and you release the germ on the vulnerable population. How do you defend yourself against germ warfare? You defend yourself by having the medical research facilities and other facilities, by having the medical system, distribution system, by having the highway system, by having the communication system, so that if the disease is unleashed and it takes it 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years before it wipes your population out, your scientists can go in and find a means of defeating it or defending the population against it. And it means you have a series of hospitals and health institutions that can distribute the vaccine or whatever it is to the population to be protected against the disease. You understand what I'm telling you? Now, you have a situation here on the continent or even in our communities with inadequate hospital facilities, inadequate roads, inadequate numbers of medical personnel, inadequate research personnel, and so forth. When the AIDS hits that continent that it has hit today, If these whites didn't come in and bring some kind of vaccine or whatever, we would be totally wiped out as a people. In fact, the plan is now not for us to be wiped out so much in terms of bombs and guns, but to be wiped out sweating in our beds without a shot fired. Which means then, ladies and gentlemen, that your doctor sons and your doctor daughters are not just there to make money and gain political and social prestige. They are a part of your defense and a part of your life. You must be able to supply them with the research facilities and the means by which, if another people attack you, they can go in and operate in your interest. You understand? They have to be educated to do that. And you must supply them with the money and the economics so that they can do it. But if you don't have the money and the facilities and so forth, another people will release a disease on you and sit back and watch you die. And therefore, the education of medical doctors and other people is no status game. It is a matter of life and death and defense. The owning of an economic system, then, is no mere getting rich and wealthy. It is a part of staying alive. It is a part of defending oneself. That is why you cannot continue to give your money and the production of your labor to another people. That is why you can't waste your money merely for status-seeking symbols and so forth like that. You're buying your own death and buying your own destruction. Financing your own death. And this is what happens when you don't know your economics and know what's going on. And this is what we are doing. Putting money in banks. Getting no loans from the same banks. The money being used to build highways to take jobs away from you. Put them out in the suburbs, building houses, building death machines, building armies, and all the other things. That's like I said, supporting Koreans, supporting Arabs, supporting every group but yourself. Look at Detroit, Michigan. Negroes starving and dying to death up there. They literally have decided to watch Detroit die. Too many black folk, and they got a mayor up there who curses too much. And they're going to teach these black folk a lesson. I'm going to tell you about this in a minute, because you see, black folk confuse political power with real power, and they're not the same thing. It's not the same thing at all. The shops in Detroit that feed our people are owned 70% by Arabs. 70%. I don't see a one over there fighting and is going to go to war. And they're going to cheer us on in Detroit while they make money and suck the blood of our community, and our black boys and girls die in the Middle East. This is the kind of game that we are into, ladies and gentlemen, and this is the kind of foolishness that we are into as a people. We should all love one another. What kind of love is it? That's not love. Love is not self-destructive. Love does not work against oneself and one's children. You got it wrong. Like I say, we got to be backwards. We're going to have to call hate love and love hate. You cannot have real political influence without having an economic system and economic influence. The Jews, less than 3% of the earth, this country's population, are influential because they have, besides their cultural influence, economic influence. Blacks, 4 and 5 times bigger in population, little or no influence. The Israelis and the Jews literally dictate U.S. foreign policy. Israel gets more money than the whole continent of Africa put together. The Russian Jews got $400 million from the U.S. Congress for housing, while black men and women sleep in the streets of this country. You see, because again, we are not using our economic power and potential to bring to bear on this country in the direction of this country. So if we are going to have true political influence in this country, we must have true economic power. You don't have economic power without You don't have political power without economic power. There's no such animal. No such animal. You can elect all of these doggone politicians you want to. Without the money, without the economic system to back them up, you're just going to get crumbs. And this is true if you see it on the continent, neo-colonialism, right? Neo-colonialism. African governments still what? Under the economic domination of Europeans. Zimbabwe, liberated? You got to be kidding. White folks there still own all the land to speak of. 5% of the population, 80% of the land and the wealth still in their hands. And you call that a free country and a liberated country, black country? In fact, they were telling the white South Africans, why are you guys carrying on? Why don't you let those Negroes have the political offices and so forth? Let them have the status position and hold on to the money and the land. So in the end, you'll still have what? The power. And African nation after African nation has found that out. They ended up with the parliaments and all the other kind of mints. Except what? The real economic power. And they're still beggars. And they're still under the influence of Europeans. They're still being exploited to the death. I wish we had time to just give some examples of the kind of exploitation that's going on in this world today in our country with African heads of state. You go even in the Caribbean, and what do you get black countries with East Indians, Lebanese, Chinese, and every other kind of ease owning the economy. And the same thing, you go to Africa, you expect your people to own everything, and again, you run into Lebanese, Arabs, and a whole bunch of other East Indians and so forth owning the mid-markets and so forth. What's going on here? It's not your country if you don't own it economically. Oh, we got to move on. Just too much to talk about here. We got to go on. We got to get over this job, ladies and gentlemen, this job business. Remember, there's a word not only of integration, there's also what? Disintegration. We have a bunch of people who believe in fairy tales. You know what they say? And they lived happily ever after. You know, we're going to get this great equality one day. And then the world just will be straight. Who told you that? Don't you know the world progresses and regresses? Simply because you may get something, and little white boys and little white girls and will hold hands together. Doesn't say it has to go on forever, right? And so you may achieve the American dream of equality. What guarantee is there that you'll what? Keep it. It's not enough to say we're going to gain equality and so forth. That's not enough. It's not enough to qualify your people for jobs. They've got to be able to do what? Keep the jobs. We're having a situation where in the New York Transit Authority, blacks at one point had 63% of those jobs. Very good paying jobs. Even a bus driver can do well over $50,000 a year if he wants to, she wants to. Some people work overtime and it's gotten as much as $100,000 a year working on the railroad, I'm telling you. Working there. And of course, the whites got a cool contract one year. They could retire after 20 years and retire at the level of their last earning. So, that last year they put in a whole lot of hours, jacked that income up, $50,000, $60,000, $75,000 a year, and they got it going for the rest of their lives, plus a cola or two in there. But then they went out and left the system, and blacks came into the system. And at one point then, blacks became 63% of that system. Now they're down to nearly 50%, and they're headed down. Now they want to get together. We need to organize. We got to get the community together. Without realizing that the organization should have taken place during the good times. But the fairy tale mentality, you see, so now we got it made. We don't have to worry. Man, don't talk to me about that politics. I got something else to do. I ain't got time to come to union meeting tonight. And it's destroying us. 85,000 people a year will be coming to this country from 1992 on. Almost 500,000 people a year will be imported into this country. And they will be coming with skills and other things. That's why America today is not giving much of a damn about the education of black people. The Time magazine stated it very clearly. The future of this country depends, they say, on the minorities and women who will be the majority of the workforce in America. But we face a dilemma. Can we educate the minorities, they say, in time to meet our needs? They doubt it, you see. After they've damned so much, now they need us, but then they recognize that it may take too long to straighten us out. So, of course, what's the solution? Let's bring them in from outside. And so now, what's going on in the MTA in New York City? We're going to bump the other people out, and we're going to put our own people in. I keep trying to warn our people, and I warn you again and again, that your security does not lie in civil rights laws. You see? A law is merely writing on books. And writing does not protect people, I'm telling you. The law is only as strong as those who enforce it. And you've gotten the law written by your enemy and enforced by your enemy. Which means then when the enemy decides to stop enforcing it, it's over for you. Or the enemy can what? Rewrite it. Read Black Power USA. We've been through this game before. In the 1870s, we had the same game. You had Negroes then. Oh, there ain't going to be no more color. There ain't going to be no more race. You had a guy they were talking about who was going to be elected a vice president, just like Jesse Jackson. Yeah, they thought the big times had come. You had Negroes going to Congress, being elected mayors, being elected governors, being buried in white graveyards, doing the whole 9 yards. Strong civil rights laws, too, protected by the federal government and the whole bit. And then one president moved in here and decided it was over, going to turn these black people back over to the southern whites, and it was wiped out. It took 100 years for us to get back to the same point. As a matter of fact, the laws we have today are not as strong as many of the laws that we had even then. We should learn that lesson, and we haven't learned from it. And the point of that lesson, Lerone Bennett really did not finish writing that book, and I wondered, you haven't finished the chapter. You got all of these facts, and you won't reach the conclusion. He finally wrote it years later when he called There We in the Second Reconstruction, and recognized that the major problem was that we did not have real power. You see, when you got real power, he can write the book and do whatever he wants to. You can deal with him, you see. But I tell my people, if there ever gets a point where the white man has got to choose between feeding his children or feeding yours, no amount of laws are going to keep him from feeding his own first. And you better recognize that. It's only power that's going to be our ultimate defense. Oh, man, I tell you. Well, I'll wrap it up here. So many things. Recognize then, ladies and gentlemen, that economics then involves some very crucial situations in our lives. And it's not just merely a matter of eating better, as I said, gaining status and this kind of business. It goes far beyond that. Now, when you look in your Webster's, it will say, economics or political economy refers to the management of the resources of a community, the science which deals with the production, distribution, and consumption of the world's resources, and the management of state income and expenditures in terms of money. I love these definitions. Highfalutin, what white people call what neutral, universal type of definitions. Interesting. The kinds that get our people trapped. No reference here really to people, even though it's implied, No real reference to people. But we had to realize then, let's bring it down. Economic production is social production. Economic production is a result of the type of ways people choose to relate one to the other. If you have an economic system, it is because people have chosen to relate to each other in some systematic fashion. and to distribute their wealth and income and the products of their labor based on some rational system of values, thoughts, and aims. You cannot take human relations and social relations out of the concept of economics. And you have to understand then that at the bottom of any economic system is the nature of relationships between human beings. Without that, you really have no economy. One of the major problems then that we face today is that black people who in terms of income represent the 9th or 10th wealthiest nation on this earth, right here, and we are not a poor people, not at all, have in a sense a little economy or no economy at all, even though we have what? Money. The presence of money does not make an economic system. It is the nature of the way you relate to each other as people, and it is the nature of social values and goals that makes an economic system. A bunch of individuals with money in their pockets are not an economic system. They are lambs to be fleeced. And that's exactly what happens to us today. We are fleeced of this wealth that we have in our pockets because we have not chosen to relate to each other in a particular sort of way so that that wealth can be used for our own benefit. Economic production is social production done in cooperation or in association with others. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to tell you one thing. When we talk about the psychological characteristics that plague our people, you must understand those psychological characteristics, those negative characteristics that we complain about so much, have been deliberately implanted, not because a people hate us, but because they're economically functional for the other people. When you look at the kind of psychological characteristics we complain about, and look at them closely, you will see they perform some kind of economic function for the other folk. You see? And notice it. Black people, 12% or 15% of the U.S. population. We buy 34 or nearly 40% of the cosmetics. What's going on here? Why do we buy so much cosmetics? I don't have to tell you, do I? I don't have to tell you. There are too many people who are unsatisfied with their African looks, who are too convinced that to be African in physiognomy is not to be attractive. Understand? That's what's going on there. Natural beauty is the enemy of the beauty shop. We don't want anybody to be naturally beautiful. You can't make money off people who are naturally beautiful. You can only make money off people who have an inferiority complex about the way they look. So what happens? Insult black folk. Tell them that African is not beautiful. Tell them that black is not beautiful. Tell them those beautiful, wonderful, thick lips are not kissable. You know, tell them all of these things, and they will bring you their money by the tons. You know, tell them their hair is bad and all that. They'll just bring you the money. And isn't it amazing? That's the function of cursing, though, you see. And if you're in authority and a person takes you as an authority and you curse them, then you try to prove that you're not what they say you are. I can show them I can buy a suit like anybody. I look at them, they're impressed. I'm buying a $1,500 suit. They're laughing at you, you fool. Just fools. What does that say? That the cosmetics industry and the other industries live off of our feeling unattractive. They survive off of our feeling unattractive. Therefore, they will never remove the what? The insult. The insult works for them. Do you understand? We must feel unattractive in order to give our money away to other people who made us feel unattractive in the first place, or who we let make us feel unattractive, to put it more accurately. Understand? The lack of self-confidence means that we don't take risks. You understand? And if we lack self-confidence, if we lack a sense of adventure and a sense of taking risks, if we lack that, we don't do what? Go into business. Therefore, we become what? Non-competitive. That permits then other people with the sense of venture, with the sense of self-confidence and so forth, to come right into our communities and enrich themselves right off of us. Do you think those people are going to implant self-confidence in you? You got another thought coming. The inability for many of us to trust each other, to act reliably in relationship to each other, mean we hesitate to pool our monies and to collect our monies and actually go into business and develop an economic system. Therefore, it permits other people who pool their money based on their ethnicity, based on their identity, and so forth, to come in and strip the money from the black community. That's why. Do you understand what I'm getting at? In other words, that's what I'm telling you. These so-called characteristics that we complain about are economically functional. And until we get those characteristics exorcised out of our systems, we will be economically uncompetitive and we will be sheared like sheep. You see? And this is what an African-centric education does. That's why you got to throw out the curriculum that's in these schools today. You understand? You got to look at what's been taken out of the African personality and what's been put in it so that others could fleece us economically, socially, and otherwise. And then you got to train it back into the children. And that's why your educational system will look nothing like what the white folk do. You understand what I'm saying? Here you are complaining about you've been in slavery all these years and Jim Crowism and all these other isms we ache and moan about day in and day out. And then we say, let's put them in the same classroom with the white children who have a whole different history, whole different experience. You know, they're not dragging in this. Do you think your kids walk into the classroom without all of this history in their minds? You got to be out of your mind. And yet, I'm telling you, black folk, our children are destroyed by the very time structure in the school itself. You must understand that every culture has a time dimension that's unique to it. You cannot let another people impose their time system on you. You understand? Here you have children with the kind of problems we talk about every day, and then you call it equal education to say they stay in the same classroom the same 45 minutes that a white child stays in there. Which means then they got to carry all of this load, and you expect them to learn the same thing at the same time, at the same point as a white child. And then you shove an achievement test in front of their faces, and when they don't pass, you're ready to classify them as deficient and learning disabled and put them in remedial education. You got to be out of your mind. You must understand your culture and who and what you're about, and impose the right kind of time system upon these children and give them the kind of time that they need to develop themselves. But if your head is caught up in equal education, you're not going to see it. You must redefine the whole concept of school. Well, it's not a teacher's job. It's not the school's position. What do you mean? The schools belong to whom? To us. They are what we what? Tell them to be. And the role of teachers is what we define those roles to be. There are no roles put in concrete about what a teacher's role is to be. Who told you that a grade can only last from September through June? You can make a grade anything you want to make it. You know that. You can make a time system any way you feel like it. But you know, we bought this idea, standard education. You see what words do to you? You see what definitions do to you? And the reason why we cannot solve the educational problem of our children is because we tried to solve them with other people's definitions. As soon as you redefine what education means to you, as soon as you redefine where you want to go as a person, the solutions to your problems begin to just flow right out. They just flow right forward. Believe me, you'll just be overrun with creative ideas of how to educate your children. But once you buy, you know, I'm a ninth grade teacher. You're not a ninth grade teacher. You know, there's no ninth grade walking around. You teach who? Human beings. You teach the children that are what? In front of you. And if they come in doing math at a fourth grade level, that's where you start teaching them. You understand? But no, you're up there teaching in ninth grade on the board and wonder why they're going, wow, back there in the back seat. Because your dignity is insulted. I'm not here to teach kindergarten. You're not teaching anybody. And yet I can show you programs, ladies and gentlemen, where educational systems have taken these children at fourth grade or fifth grade levels, and they have moved as many as 5 grades in mathematics in 1 year. In other words, you can restructure this system in a way that you can move. That doesn't mean, when I talk about a time system, it doesn't mean our children come out behind other children at all. In fact, you can organize it where they come out ahead. But you got to know what you're doing. You got to organize it in terms of your time. Human relations, this is what it's called. What I got here? Okay. I've got 2 minutes to speak. And you know right from the organization that the people don't know what they're doing. When you talk about the education of your children, it takes weeks of discussion, really. Yeah, and months and sometimes years of working and debating and thinking and working through. And this is another thing. So when you come and talk about the problems of your people, you've got to give yourself time to talk about the problems of your people. And you got to, you know, but that's another reason why, you see, the black person and the black child must be trained into a short attention span. You understand? I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, this stuff is all hooked up. That's why you got to get sleepy when you're reading something. Get headaches reading. You know. Yeah, it's set up. Put them up at a rock concert and all night long. You know? But put them in front of a book, knock right out. Gotta be. Discuss something pertinent to the survival of the race, I gotta go. You know? Discuss something that's destructive. Hey, don't stop. Let's keep it rolling. Yeah, we gotta have that kind of head in order to be in the position we're in. Definitely. You see, and that's why when you talk about the education of black children, you gotta make some room for deliberate attention skills training. Yeah. You can't assume that it exists there. You got to actually put it in there consciously and train it in, because the system organizes it in such a way as to take it out. You see? And what happens when you operate on white folks' psychology and you assume that the child has certain characteristics based on a white middle-class child, you're in trouble right there. Right there. You're in trouble. And yet you feel insulted that you have to take time and teach the children manners and behavior and other kind of thing, and see that as an insult. It's not an insult. Every culture has to teach its children manners and behavior and ritual, and every culture has institutions where this takes place. And if it doesn't take place in the home, there is no embarrassment with us saying it's going to take place where? In the schools. It's no big deal. Just as our ancestors took males out into the male clubs or into the woods or somewhere and train them into manhood. We can take our males or our females and train them the way we want to be. It's amazing, you know. We send our children to other people who say they hate you and say this and don't want them there anyway, and then we wonder, why they act like that? You know? Your children can only act like you need them to act if you do what? Train them yourself. Other people are going to train them to act in a way that supports their own position in the world. Please, use common sense. But again, what do I say? In order for us to be in the position we're in, we must be robbed of our common sense. We must be blind to the obvious. It cannot happen otherwise. So then, he talked about this economic system. We have to recognize, number one, that wealth creation is an African tradition. Many of us have forgotten this. We think money is to be made by Jews. Get a Jewish accountant. They Jews, they really know something about money. You mean to tell me you can't count money? Come on, that's ridiculous. But you hear people making ridiculous statements like that, you know? Just like there's some colored folk who think 2 + 2 is not 4 in the ghetto. It's only 4 when you bust the children out of town. You know, this kind of silliness are only 4 when the white folks teach your child. 2 + 2 is 4 anywhere. Yeah. It's amazing. We have this kind of thing, though. And we wasted generations of our children and destroyed generations of our children thinking that we just couldn't teach 2 + 2 is 4 right where we were as people. And thinking that we needed people with master's degrees to teach it. Another hang-up, too. You don't need master's degrees to teach somebody fractions, addition and arithmetic. You got a whole nother people who failed to educate your children, still setting up the criteria for qualification. Come on, don't be ridiculous. How have you flunking my children and destroying my children, and then you're going to sit on the board and determine if I'm qualified to teach? You got to be crazy. But we permit that. The wealth creation is an African tradition. Making money is an African tradition. Ladies and gentlemen, we created it first. It is our heritage. When you move from the Nile and the Tigris and Euphrates, Mesopotamia, when you talk about then the dark-skinned people who inhabited the Mesopotamian region, the Sumerians, the blacks of southern Babylonia and so forth, we're talking about a people who built great civilizations because they had great economies. I'm going to be back to that in a minute. Black people who passed on to the Semitics, the Jews and the Arabs of today, a writing system. We often talk about Egypt, and we have a lot of people talking about Egypt, and we get a lot of emphasis on the mysteries and the gods and, you know, all of these other wonderful things, and that's fine. But there's too little talk about the economy of Egypt. How were these pyramids paid for? You may talk about Heru and all the rest of them, but you will not see Heru building those pyramids. And you will not see the other gods building those pyramids. Those pyramids were built by men and women and people. You can talk about gods and so forth, inspiring people to build temples, but ultimately it is the hand of man that stacks bricks up on top of brick. And those men had to be paid. Those people had to be organized. Those plans had to be drawn. They had to be supervised. Money has to be raised. They had to buy material from various craftsmen and so forth. So when you talk about the pyramids of Egypt, you're talking about a total economic system that involved thousands upon thousands of people and thousands and upon thousands of professionals, brick masons, craftsmen of various types, engineers, mathematicians, carpenters, scribes, priests, teachers, astronomers, accountants, statesmen, all kinds of jobs. What do you mean? You think you being a professional today is something new in the history of black people? It took professionals to put Egypt together, ladies and gentlemen. It took craftsmen, tradesmen. It took business people. You don't build great cities until you have raised surplus agricultural crops. You don't build great cities unless there's trade going on there. You don't create writing and science and so forth unless people have enough surplus wealth and surplus time that they can think and work and do these kind of things. So when you see men writing and doing mathematics and building cities and building pyramids and building roads and building governments and building all kinds of institutions, that means then you have an economy. And you have people of various professions and various skills operating together. And when you look then at the history of mankind, people engaged in business and professions, you will see the very first people engaged in professions and skills, jobs, and other things are black folk before the white man even comes out of the cave. And yet you dare now not to think of yourself as an accountant or think of yourself as a business person. You have to be robbed to think of that. When we look at the other empires, and I can't describe them now because of the time, I wish we could, and we talk about Ghana, gold, recognize this. You have no great people and great civilizations without what? A great economic system. Under each of these empires is what? An economic system, a control of wealth, a creation of wealth. When you talk about the Ghanaian king with an empire that lasts thousands of years, with political power spread out for miles around, you're talking about administration, you're talking about governors, you're talking about bureaucrats, because that's what it takes to run an empire. You just don't run an empire because you call it one. You're talking about an army that has to be provisioned. You're talking about an army that has to be supported. This king was able to bring out into the field 200,000 men to go to battle with thousands of horses, with as many as 40,000 men with spears and other things. These have to be made by somebody. These have to be provisioned in some sort of way. Do you understand what I'm getting at? In other words, then when you talk about these great civilizations, you're talking about great economies. Why are they great? Why was Ghana great? Because it had control of gold, had control of soil. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, you don't build a great people or a great civilization unless you have cornered the market somewhere, someplace, and have control over some vital economic resources. If we are thinking about being a great people and being seen as one and respected by other people, then we must get control of vital resources and some vital economic substances in this world today, or else we won't make it. Singing and all the other stuff is not going to do it. You look at the same way if you look at Mali, which was even bigger than Ghana, and the fact that it spread for miles and miles. Mansa Kankan Musa had so much gold, he inflated the whole economy of the Middle East and just literally upset it, having gold all around. You look at Shanghai with this great educational institutions and the whole bit, you will see then that African people have long practiced the creation of wealth, that the creation of wealth is our natural inheritance, that the creation of wealth is our gift to mankind itself. We somehow have let this memory and this tradition slip from our hands. And now we almost feel funny to own something or to control something or to take over something. And I'm going to tell you one other thing, you nice folk. When you talk about survival, often in survival you're going to have to take something from someone else. You understand? You got to take back from these people who own your wealth in these communities. You don't owe them a living. You don't owe them a thing. Okay? And you got to take it back, and you don't have to be shy about it. You got to learn the art of selfishness. Oh, yes, because it's a part of self-preservation. Oh, they come in here, they feed their aunts and their uncles and everybody, and the only thing they hire your sons for is to sit up on a ladder to see that you don't steal. How can you be that's so insulting? Here we are, and when I talk about black crime, a part of the black crime I talk about is the betrayal of black children by black adults who giving all of their money away, feeding Koreans and feeding every other race, while our own children go in want on the streets. And then we wonder why we have to be afraid of them. We wonder why they stab us and why they mug us and do the things they do. Well, they don't show any respect for the adults anymore. How much respect have you shown by giving your money away to support the other children? And a part of the crime problem that we have today is the exploitation of money by black people to support other people than their children because of some twisted idea of human love. Backwards, out of it. We have forgotten it. We suffer from what I call social amnesia. You see, we think history is merely a remembering of dates. History is not a mere remembering of dates, ladies and gentlemen. If history was that innocent, why do you think the white man wrote you out of it? You understand? History is you. History is who you are. You are your history. Who and what you're about and what you think is a result of your historical experience. If you don't know your history, you do not know yourself. If you're not aware of your history, your personal history, which determines the way you behave, you don't know why you behave the way you do. And you become a puzzle to yourself. And that's why you hear us asking, why we act like that? Yeah, we're a puzzle. That comes because we don't have knowledge. If we have the knowledge of our historical experience, how we have been created by that experience, we could answer the question. But since we don't have the knowledge of how we came to be, we don't have the means of determining what we shall be as a people. We then fall under the influence of compulsions, and we get out of self-control. Do your teachers complain that your children lack self-control? Well, know this, ladies and gentlemen, you cannot be self-controlling and under the control of another people at the same time. You understand? So the children must lack self-control so they can come under the ultimate control of the prison. You understand? And it's this quick reading of an experiment here done in Omni, February 1984, called Timeless Mind. This experiment, if you can read this and meditate on this, do so. It's a very deep thing here. A psychologist hypnotized the students, and we are hypnotized, by the way, black folk. Yeah, we are under trance every day. Believe me, we are totally under trance. When I wake you, the psychologist said, hypnotist said, the past will be gone. This is the post-hypnotic suggestion. You hear what I'm saying? He said, when you wake up, you won't even remember you have a past. Okay, and you can do that with people under hypnosis. When the post-hypnotic suggestion took hold, the student became drowsy, infantile, losing both memory and the power of speech. Later, he reported a vague sense of meaninglessness. You understand where I'm going with that? Having been robbed of his past, he gets lazy. He's drowsy. His mental potential is undeveloped. He has no aim and no purpose because you only get that from your past. You understand? So when the people take your history from you, it's not merely a robbing you of knowledge. It is the creation of a consciousness and a type of feeling. And so you wonder why we have so many aimless, purposeless people wandering out here in this world, and people who don't know why they're here and where they're going, and people who are lazy, without energy, lacking initiative. This is in part created because you have a people who have forgotten their history. If you know deep in your heart, and you believe deep in your heart, and your history tells you deep in your heart, that you are the original businessman, the original accountant, the original creator of wealth, couldn't anybody stop you from running over the world and creating wealth. But it's only because that history has been wiped out. You have no basis for your self-confidence that puts you out there, and no basis and foundation. The tradition is gone. You can't recall the traditions, you see. So what I'm saying then, when your history is removed, the very coping skills which your forefathers have developed over the centuries are completely what? Lost to you. You see? So to take a people's history away is to take their coping skills away. The remembering of your history will bring back into your conscious the means by which you can create wealth. And one of the problems then is the reason why we don't create wealth today is because, first of all, we don't think we're the original wealth creators, and secondly, we don't know how we did it in the past. And I'll tell you up front, the Koreans got it. The same technique, the Japanese got the same technique, and the other people, and that's how they do it. Because they didn't do what? Forget their past. But you know, we want to be white folk. This man went on and he eliminated their past, present, or future. He gave others a vastly expanded past. Some of them he expanded their past. You know, you got a bigger history than you really got. They became egocentric. You know, and we know about that too, don't we? Yeah. Of people who steal your history and take and put it to themselves. You see, of course, when you come from an illustrious family, right, and you have great ancestors, you know, that kind of makes you stand up, doesn't it? That makes you demand what? Respect. The whole deal goes with it. But when you believe you come out of a Tarzan-like jungle, you know, you want to, can you please let me have something? You know, that kind of thing. And you're glad to get a job. You don't think you should own the company. You just want a job. You don't go in there and say, my father's and my mother's own businesses like this. You know, and I'm going to own it. And I'm going to take over. Now, you can't even think that kind of thought. Because what? The history's gone. Other people, when they tell these white boys, oh, you created capitalism, you made, you know, it's out of your genius that the Industrial Revolution was created. Not out of the enslavement of black people and the system based on Jamaican rum and molasses and the whole bit. No, it's the genius of the European, you know. And now you feel, oh, well, I don't see any evidence of that genius in my people. With no future, the people felt a loss of identity, a euphoric, mystical sensation free of both anxiety and motivation. What's going on here? Oh, I wish I could say. Sometimes they took the past and the present away and just told them the future, you know. And strangely, they got self-satisfied in the whole bit. You know, what is an expanded future? Heaven. Yeah, you know, heaven. Don't worry about nothing on earth now. You know, don't be concerned about anything going on in the real world. In fact, you just lay down and wait to die. Because you're going to have the great party in the sky that goes on forever. Don't worry about feeding the children and taking care of the children as if God is not going to also judge you in terms of how you cared for these children. Read Matthew 14 again. When the master went away and gave the servants so many talents and chastised them when he came back and said, I gave you this much. What did you do with it? I gave you this. Well, master, you know you were so hard and you segregationists and you racists. And I figured I'd just hide this little talent I got under the... What did he say? Give me the talent, man, and I'm going to take that talent and do what? Give it to the people who have even more. To him who has what? More shall be given. To him who has not, even that which he has is going to be what? Taken from him. What did I tell you at the beginning of this thing? You have children who are second to none. Talk earlier, walk earlier, intellectually advanced, the whole 9 yards. You got it. You got a natural head start. This coloring in your skin is not only in your skin, it is a part of your nervous system. It is a part of the system that is used to process information. It is one of the reasons why these boys and people can outshoot all these other guys and can process any kind of information much more swiftly. You know, you see a man running a basketball, he's just not a dummy there. Here's a person who's got to take into scope a total field of people in dynamic movement and also be sensitive to his own body and be sensitive to what he wants to do with the ball and calculate all of this information in a single second and put it in. You're talking about the operation of a tremendous brain. You understand? This walking early and talking early is connected to this color, ladies and gentlemen. It's more than paint. It is a part of the whole system that we have. And God has given it to us. And yet we have people who will not go to these schools and see about their children. We have people who will not appropriately raise these children. We have people here who economically rob their children of their heritage, and they go to church and kick over benches and shout and so forth and think when they go to heaven, God is not going to call them into account for the talent that he's given them. I gave you these children. I gave you these talents. What have you done with these talents? Out with you. And what happens? What children you do have that do something end up working for the white man, and the white man grows in wealth, and the talents that they could have contributed to the advancement of the black race is given to another people, and now we end up crying about how poor we are and how we are starving. Use that Bible, right, ladies and gentlemen? It's right there. You don't read it, right? You're hollering and shouting too much. Oh yeah, you're going in there for thrill. I'm telling you. And you got preachers who are not giving you real lessons. They're giving you rhythms. There's nothing being taught there. You know, you got to have some real information. Your Lord told you. And he even cursed the fig tree. Because what did he say? You tell a tree by what? The fruit it bears. And if it does not bear fruit, it is good for nothing but to be cut down and thrown into the fire. Didn't he tell you that? And you sit here and watch these educational systems and watch this so-called integration and all of this other mess destroy your children, and what's your solution to it? Give me more. What is the lesson? The lesson is you measure something by its consequences. And if it does not work the way it is supposed to work, it must be thrown out and something else put in its place. You go to church, but where are you learning this, ladies and gentlemen? You can't be learning even a truly religious lesson and let your children sink into the dirt. It's not possible. It's not possible. So what happens here? The past is being taken away from you, and that means the coping skills. Now, what do we mean by those coping skills? How do the Koreans raise their money? They basically raise it by what we Africans used to call susu. The West Indians called partners. The Americans called sophisticatedly revolving credit associations. In Africa, it was called isusu. In the Cameroons, it's called tontine, an old African system of raising money, creating wealth. The American black forgot it. Yeah. The West Indian or the Caribbean, remembering it, has used it. The Chinese use it effectively. Japanese. The Koreans call it kai. And there are a number of systems. What is the system? It's simply one where people collect their monies together and make loans to each other. You see, and circulate the loan. I was talking to a young man before I left New York. He has a group of people. They furnish each other $12,000 a month by moving their money around the circle. Each one putting in $250 a week, and it goes right around. And so each one of them, each month, got $12,000 that they can use to invest in business or real estate or so forth. Not going into the banks begging and so forth. Not having to pay back 1.5% above prime. You know, why give your money to the banks? It doesn't make sense to give money to banks. The Koreans don't give money to banks. The greatest percentage of money for people going into business comes from families and friends and community and so forth. We have been psyched out, being economically miseducated. The first thing the white man tell you, get a good business plan and go to the bank. You know you're done for right there. You're done in right there. You can make your own banks. You can lend yourself money in these circles at low interest. There are many ways you can work this kind of system. You can create your own credit unions as a base for that. No problem there in doing so. Those systems are systems that we inherited. If you go into government, then go into government knowing that the politics of business, or the business of politics is what? Business. It's not about welfare. That's the other thing our black politicians get over on us. I'm going to see that you have more welfare. I'm going to see that you have more of this. No, man, see that you have the treasury of the city. That's what the other people have. The major function of the government is to distribute income and wealth. It's to manage the system. The greatest percentages of its laws and rules are passed in terms of the distribution of money. The chief function of politics is the manipulation of money and distribution of money and allocation of wealth. And that's what other people go into it for. Not for status, not for handouts. Look at this thing here we got. New York City spends $6 billion, the Educational Board of Education alone spends $6 billion. You can make a lot of millionaires with that money. You can become a millionaire selling that board, what? Chalk. Really. And it doesn't take even a half a brain to become rich. All you got to do is have what? Your people where? Own it. With the right kind of mentality who are going to send those contracts your way. And then you just order it from the manufacturer and drop ship it over there and say, send my check. That's what it's about. But when you get people who don't understand the nature of government and don't understand the nature of politics, you're going to get then poverty pimps running for office who are going to, do handouts and so forth. To taking over, and now you got a school system that 80% black and Hispanic in New York, but the other groups, ethnic groups, are sitting right there because they're going to siphon the money off of it. And they're there not for education, but to see that the money goes in the direction of their people. If you can redirect that money into your own city coffers, then you won't have to pimp for welfare. You make your people rich just from the tax till itself. What do you think the government does with money? It buys resources. It buys supplies. It buys from people and business people. Why can't they be your people? So your going into political government should not then merely be a status system. You must deliberately go in there to get that treasury to move in your direction. And so therefore we must move creatively toward the government. We must use the traditional systems that we have available to us. We must use the credit unions and the other things. We must recognize the value of our social relationship, but most of all, we must begin to see ourselves as a nation within a nation. Because you really can't set up a full system until you see yourself as a people. And you must identify yourself as a people. You are not American citizens. The very fact that civil rights laws had to be passed especially for you means that you're not in it, man. Because if you're a full citizen, you wouldn't need it. You wouldn't need any of this nonsense. And we are sitting around waiting to be citizens. We are out of this system as it is. We may as well use our being out of it to our advantage. If we organize as a nation, you could see the wealth we could produce here and use for ourselves. Not only could we use our wealth to create ourselves here, we could create wealth in Africa itself. We have an international system. There's tremendous business to be done with our African brothers and sisters. Speaking politically, by the way, it is very important. I heard some state got favored nation status the other day. Do you know what that means? That means the United States gives it special rights to market its resources in this country. Believe me, ladies and gentlemen, you cannot be wealthy unless you have access to large markets. The United States is one of the largest markets in the world. Black people are one of its largest markets. Do you understand? And simply because you manufacture something doesn't mean that you can sell it. A nation has to give you permission to sell your manufacture past its borders. And so while you're in offices, black men and black women, when you go to Washington, you must see that the African nations have favored nation status in this country. That's why you can't see a pencil with "Made in Africa" on it, or anything with "Made in Africa" on it, because there's a political system that blocks it out. When you can go to Washington, D.C. and get favored nation status for Africa, you open this market for African manufacture, then you can stimulate the technological and the manufacturing development of Africa itself. And you can begin to operate as business people with Africa and develop a power in this country and a power in this world that you've never seen before. You can literally take over this country. I hear some African brothers say, I don't want to live in this country anymore. I said, you can't get away from white man. White man's all over the doggone blood. Have you thought about taking over the country? Okay. We got to end it. Did that frighten you? Oh. We have some people say, we're a minority that can't take over a majority country. Oh, yes. Look at white South Africa. Look at the others. When you connected to a majority country and you see yourself as a total people like the Europeans see themselves, you'll be surprised what you can do as a minority. You understand? If you made that African connection, the African connection from here to the continent, the African connection from here to India, the African connection to the Caribbean, the African connection into Central and South America, there's no way we can't wield real power in this country and move in the forward. Don't you know that the European is going to be a minority in America by the year 2020? That's in it. Too much to talk about. No nation, no civilization has come to the fore without new organization, without thinking new thoughts, without working, without actually doing, without being willing to take a chance, a willingness to risk all, without a willingness to go against overwhelming odds, without a determination to be the best, to be superior, without a desire to determine its destiny and that of others, without a willingness to fight, to shed blood, to risk defeat, the battle must be joined. It must be fought, be it a battle of the mind wars of the spirit, of will, of bucks, of iron and steel, shell and bomb, of tank and plane, of rockets and satellites and Star Wars, of technology, of information. The battle must be fought. The gauntlet thrown down, the chip knocked from the bully's shoulder, the line stepped over, the clash and clang of sword, curses of men and moans of pain. The battle must be joined. Fought in the street from door to door, in the schoolroom, in the boardroom, in the bedroom, in the war room, hand-to-hand combat must commence. The battle must ultimately be won in the field. It matters not if you can eruditely delineate the subtleties and nuances of racism and the racial discrimination. if you can delicately dissect with the master surgeon's skill the anatomy of race and the body politic, if you can tease out the tiniest thread, if you can paint the most beautiful dream on canvas and write the greatest vision on parchment, or ride in your time machine and visit ancient African kingdoms, cities, and empires, or feel the pain and degradation of slavery, or celebrate all we have given to the world, or point out with great exclamation the white devil, still the challenge must be taken up. Fire must fight fire. Institutions, traditions, habits, hopes must be uprooted, raised, and put to the torch. No stone left unturned. And institutions, traditions, habits, hopes must be restored, rekindled, or built anew. Bricks stacked in place. New songs must be sung. New voices must carry the tune. New feet must march to the new drum beat. New hands, new banners, and standards raised. These songs must be your songs. The voices, your voices. The feet, your feet. The hands, your hands. The soul and soul to the devil must be your soul. A new world must be created. Make it your world. Thank you.
Okay, it's on. Mm-hmm. Question in dealing with Afrocentric education. We're experimenting with an Afrocentric educational institution in Austin, Texas. A question that came to us the other day was, how do we, in doing that, it's a supplemental type of school, it's an alternative after school type program, Saturday school program. Mm-hmm. How do we prepare our children to deal with the school, given this new information that they're getting? How do they go back into school and deal with their teachers and the system's lies and other types of deception?
Yes. Well, first of all, of course, one of the things you're going to do is to teach them to discern the lies and to discern the falsifications, because you, of course, are giving them a true history and the real knowledge of the world. You will also give them an understanding of how that system, as projected in the classroom, seeks to manipulate their minds and their consciousness, which of course is a very powerful weapon in their being not subverted by it, you see. And in that sense, they can be there in it, but not of it as such. You can then, of course, teach them also how to manipulate it in order for us to succeed in this so-called system, because we're still locked in it at this point, and so many of us are stuck in it. We have to be educated in terms of what I call subversion. Those of us who teach in it must teach subversively, that is, while appearing to give the system what it wants, actually giving ourselves and our children what they need. And those of us often who are educated in it might at times appear to give it what it wants, but at the same time are getting much more out of it than the system thinks we are getting. In writing of papers and things, where there's a free time to write papers and things of this nature, of course, and the student then should write those papers and produce those papers relative to African history, African topics, and titles and values and orientations. And of course, you will teach them how to back up what they say and document what they say, so that if there's an unfair grade given, then they can objectively deal with the teacher and that grade can be changed. And of course, the other thing is that you are there not only as their teacher on Saturdays and the weeknights, you are also there as their protectors in these schools. So if they are being unfairly dealt with and so forth, the school knows that it doesn't have the child there as a victim, but that you and their parents and other people will be there to defend those children. It is very important for us as adults, and this is one of the major problems I find when we're dealing with our children. It's hard to get over to us as parents the importance of showing up at the school. You see, that changes things so much. And so when other people, and one of the reasons why many people pick on us is because they know we're unprotected. You see, when though they learn that that child is protected, there's a parent to stand behind them, there's a group of people who know what they're talking about and they're keeping up with what's going on, then this child can continue its development even there, because it can get a lesson right there in observing the machinations and the other issues that you have taught it about. So even when the lying and all the other stuff goes on, it can still be learning the processes. I tell people, some people say, I don't read that paper because it's full of lies. I said, but you can still read it and gain something from it. Ask why they're lying. What's the purpose for lying? How are they lying? What are they trying to accomplish? You can still run an analysis that leads to intellectual growth and development. So the mere fact that people are lying or distorting doesn't mean that one gets out of the school. One can sit there and analyze the game. And it can be a great fun. And it easily leads to development. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
I should like to thank you very much for your speech. I would say this is the best speech I've ever heard.
Thank you.
In my lifetime.
Thank you.
You made mention of, my question is, how can we as a people get out of the shackles, especially Africans, from the shackles of colonialism and imperialism? Mm-hmm. Because all the very things that you said, that even though we have all the education, but education mm-hmm. somehow becomes very detrimental to our own cause, mm-hmm. To our aspirations. Mm-hmm. But there's one thing that I know very well, that the enemy that we talked about is not sleeping.
No, not at all.
It's a system that has been set up. How do we counteract? Mm-hmm. It's just unfortunate that in the 60s, Ghana, where I come from, was economically stronger than Japan. Mm-hmm. We had a very sensible leader called Kwame Nkrumah. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you know about him.
Yes, yes.
There was a system set up by the Western world to destroy this man. Mm-hmm. And they brought up a stooge from Europe who was trained by the University of Oxford University. Mm-hmm. So that's the guy they wanted him to lead Africa. Mm-hmm. How do we as a people protect ourselves and be able to counteract this effect? Because even if you look at this country, every intelligent African American is branded as evil. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I get what you're saying. Yes, now for me with the, of course, Kwame Nkrumah and even how Ghana left over, 200 million pounds or so over there in England, and the kind of games that went on behind that. Of course, we do this the way, there's no magic about it, of course. It's, first of all, the willingness to sacrifice, and the willingness to struggle, the willingness to accept casualties. One of the things I run into often is that many of us, we want to make a war, but we don't want to have any casualties, And you try to say, well, you're not going to have war without casualties. And you're not going to have war without tremendous sacrifices. And so the thing is, we have to, as we're doing now, revamp the educational system, revamp the history, insist that this history be taught correctly. And of course, not only did it be taught in the university, because the major history, I don't think will ever be taught at public expense, not the type that we really need to teach our people. It's still going to have to be taught in our cultural institutions. We're going to have to use subterfuge, like everybody else does. We're going to have to infiltrate and sabotage the way other people do. We will have to remember the white man's strength is also his weakness. And we'd have to look at our dependence as a strength. And there's a good illustration of that. Japan has no natural resources whatsoever. And by that definition, Japan really should be a dependent nation. And on a certain level it is. These people consciously said, we are going to change our dependencies into strengths. And it's interesting to see how they did it. They made their suppliers dependent upon supplying them, such that the suppliers couldn't even get out. Desire is created. And that's why I say that crime is a social thing. What do I mean by that? You don't kill somebody for a pair of sneakers until sneakers have been invented. You see? And put before your face and your desire provoked. You didn't have the desire before those things came into being. And so you must recognize that what happens then is the European provokes desires in African people by producing something and owning what he uses to provoke the desire so he can pull your money out. And what does that mean then? That if we change our desires as people, if we get off of this gig that consumption means status, and this happens in African countries as well, and this idea that you can consume yourself into wealth, we can begin to change this equation. Sometimes that means you're going to have to institute very tough governments, and governments that on the surface appear to be repressive because they're going to block the importation of a lot of things. And that means then even within this country, black children and other children are going to have to be trained out of a lot of the things they have been taught to desire. When you look at Elijah Muhammad, the greatest psychologist this country has ever produced, when he demonized the white man, it wasn't about hate. We don't understand the function of myth. You see, you give people a myth to bring about a certain behavior. When he demonized the white man, he then cut the appetite for white products off. And since he cut the appetite for white products off, the money that was spent buying for white folk could now be spent building up the nation itself. You see what I'm saying? So then, and one other thing on that, so we must change desires as people. That's very, very important. We don't need hardly 80% of the stuff we think we need, period. And if we can get out of that, we could spend it. You know, I used to go to a restaurant and used to get coffee and donut every morning for $1.35. You know, 7 days a week I've spent $10. I spent $40 a month in that place. Over a year I've spent $500 or $600 right there. You think if how many Negroes go in there thinking that they're just buying a little cup of coffee and a donut, and how much money is being given on the basis of that? And so when you transform this, now the other thing is that we are not going to ever be able to convince the masses of our people to go this way. It means then you're going to get small groups of people who literally will take over the economic direction of a community. In other words, we can be conspiratorial. We can get together, use this susu that I talked about earlier. You can get 20 or 30 people and get those people to develop their money in such a way that they buy stores and shops and so forth. After a while, you can organize yourself so that these other people that own your communities will be run out, and you can put them in there and begin to transform the community economically and take it over. If you show success, and this is what I tell nationalists, it's not enough to tell black people nationalism and talk about it. If you can build real businesses, people will come to you and say, how did you do it? One more thing. If you use geometric growth, if 10 people learn a lesson and teach 10 more and 10 more, within a few short years, you could have your kind of people all over a nation and in control of the major political and social instruments in that nation. And then you can rise to national power and change the direction of the country. Read Machiavelli. Read these whiteys who tell the whiteys how to run the game and use the tactics themselves. Yes, sir.
I appreciate being here. This has been the highlight of my life, being
Thank
here
you.
today.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a statement.
Mm-hmm.
When Jimmy Carter was president, he went to Israel when Menachem Begin was then prime minister. Mr. Carter was going to go over and straighten Mr. Begin out on his mistreatment of the Palestinian people.
Mm-hmm.
When Mr. Carter came back from his visit to Israel, Palestine, a reporter asked him, Mr. Carter said, what did you discuss with Mr. Begin about the Palestinian problem?
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Carter's reply was, Mr. Begin understands the Old Testament better than I do.
He definitely does. There's a book out now called By Way of Deception. Some of you might be familiar with. You know, I'm telling you, I want to say what may be heretical to a lot of people. In the reading of, we push African history, and well, we should. And not only must we push African history, we must push psychohistory, the understanding of how people are created psychologically by their history. But we also must understand European history psychologically as well. Because many of the methodologies and approaches of how people are manipulated and how propaganda is used and all of these things are right there, and we can pull it right out and use it to our own defense. Because the techniques of brainwashing and manipulation are the techniques that belong to all mankind. They're not just white folks. They're used for everybody. And often sometimes while we are dealing with our self-esteem, we overlook the manuals on how one achieves political power and gains political power. So like I said, we need to read the Machiavellis. We need to read Clausewitz, Liddell Hartz, and these other writers on military, economic strategy, and all these other kinds of things. And when you read, say, by way of deception, for instance, this gentleman who belonged to the Israeli Mossad, probably the top intelligence agency in the world, that literally has this way in the world, killing anybody who feels like it when he wants to. And of course, he states up front, in fact, their title is By Way of Deception. That's their motto. A small group of people cannot rule a large group of people unless they deceive them. That's the only way it can be done. The midget cannot rule the giant unless the giant thinks that he's a midget and thinks the midget is a what? Is a giant. That's why I said we had to be reversed. And we got a 10% white population with a big population of black folk, and we think of white folk as big, the man, and this kind of stuff. And here we are, and we got all of these resources, and we have people who don't have resources. We see them as rich, and we see ourselves as poor. We have to be turned around, you see. And so they recognize very clearly that the only way they can win is by way of deception. That's why the devil is called what? The great deceiver. That's his chief method. And that's why Elijah Muhammad calls the white man what? The devil. That's why he talks of him as a tricknologist, because he knows the very weapon of a minority of people must be tricknology and must be what? Deception. And when you read in this book, then this Israeli will tell you that the Israelites say one thing: me first. Everything for what? Israel. Nothing else matters. And we will do everything for Israel no matter what happens. And that's why they are vicious. That's why other people fear them. That's why they've beaten Hitler at being vicious to other people. And then, of course, they run the sight game. They've given this world their so-called religion, which is, of course, we know is an African-based religion. You see? I have a gentleman doing a research right now, can show you that many of the black hymns that we sang in church are repeats of phrases sung to Egyptian gods. I mean, right down to white horses and chariots going across the sky and the whole number, because they were infiltrated right into the Old Testament from Moses, who was an Egyptian, right into Christianity, and of course, circle back on us as people. So we have to learn then how to use those methods, and we have to learn how to see through deception. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Come on, come on.
Thank you, brother.
Oh, okay.
I too want to thank you for your
Yes.
comments this
Thank you.
afternoon. I want to look a little bit at the conspiracy part of your comments this afternoon. I think we've gotten the message out to the parents that they need to come back into the classroom and visit their kids in the classroom. But I think what's happening is, from their experience, they really have not begun to see the real threat there. My question to you is, in your travels, have you seen the message getting out that there has been a blueprint given to our European educators at some point where they now know to take out our male and female students at grade level 4 and put them into special ed classes, and it's especially male, but it's male and female, and that is a conspiracy. We really haven't gotten that message out yet, that the parents need to know where the threat is.
Right. Now, you're going to have a major problem with that, and one of the problems we run against, and I find people having this problem often, when you use the word conspiracy, typically, of course, people will catch you up on that word. Well, if you say there's a conspiracy, where are the people, where's the smoking gun, what white folk meet together and plan it out this way? And of course, I've seen some of our people get caught on that question, Well, and when you can't really say who did what and where and when, oh yeah, you're just dreaming and you're talking out of time, even though inside you're telling the truth. But one of the things we must recognize that you really don't need a cloak and dagger thought out conference to have this program take place. And this is a part of the slickness of the system, you see. When you have people who operate on the same value system with the same goals in mind, right? And have the same outlook on life, they then can create very similar or the same effects, even though they don't know each other personally, even though they never met each other personally. You see what I'm saying? And of course, so how they pull this conspiracy off without appearing to meet or coming together so you can point it at them is that by inculcating certain common values, the value being we're not going to let these people get ahead on some level, and a value that feels threatened whenever you look like you're moving forward. And you get the Supreme Court rulings changed, and you veto the Civil Rights Bill, based on, we're against quota. It's against the American value system to have quotas, and you notice all this stuff is argued on the what? The value system, you see. And so consequently, it ends up knocking black people out of jobs and doing the kind of things it needs to do, arguing on the value system, many of which black people even accept, you see. And one of the things I was talking about, the definition of education and the attitudes toward education, because many of our parents and even black professionals are still operating with those definitions in their head, in effect, you carry out the wishes of the system without even realizing that this is the case. So it's very difficult to break through that kind of barrier. So you're going to have to develop a means by which, in a sense, you literally savor people without them even knowing they're at war or being saved. And this is going to take some stuff. But it means then that those of us as professionals, or those of us who come to see the light, professional or not, will go in, make these amendments. One of the reasons why I'm writing this book right now, it is a rationale for changing the educational system. In other words, I'm trying to provide a rationale so that parents and people all over this country, in reading this book, can now put a total educational program on the superintendent's desk and say, this is how we want them taught, this is why we want them taught this way, this is the way we want it out, based on scientific studies and the whole number, and this is what we're going to agitate and get. And small groups of people can really pull this off. I know people in Newark, New Jersey, you got a small group of black people who are beginning to transform that system because they know where they're coming from and they know where they're going, and they're able to turn this thing around. The other thing is this: those of us who get control of our economic system and use that money to create black schools, we then can provide a demonstration project for the rest of the people. When they see those children coming out of there, learning and thinking and fully potentialized, they're going to come to you. How do you do it? How can I get my child as a part of it? In other words, again, going back to that old Bible, right? Put your, what is a city that sitteth on a hill, right? Putting your light up there so that people are what? Moving toward it. That's why the nationalists must not only talk to people, we must actually build and create and demonstrate to people that our ideology what? Works. You see? And when we do that, we'll get the people to come our way. That's why right now, I'll be right with you in a second. That's why right now my goal in Harlem, for instance, New York, and I'm telling the nationalists, we should own 125th Street, take it over. You don't have to preach at black people about how great we are. You don't have to preach to black people that we're great businessmen and all that. The very fact that you exist on that street and you're doing business on that street projects that whole message to the people. And because that community is a worldwide community, all African people from this country and from the world over coming into that community, seeing that community owned and controlled by Africans, will begin to transform the whole of the African world without one lecture being stated. It's right there. And so the thing for us to do, nationalists, is to get out here, take care of business, open these schools, open the minds of our children, and show what can happen when they learn that nationalistic lesson. We'll pull this world, we'll pull our people along with us, and we'll change the world. Because the world is rarely changed by the total masses. It is almost always pushed by a relatively small group of people. Now, and so you got to learn how you can use your small group to affect change, even when people are objecting to it and don't know what's happening. Okay? All right. I guess.